Moscow American here on another, maybe even more beautiful day, because I like slightly cloudy weather as long as I'm not getting like a flood pouring down on me. So this is kind of perfect. Just a little bit of sun, a little bit overcast, a little bit of breeze. Amazing. Anyway, checking from the newest news announcements, right? I want to say it was Kash Patel was putting out announcements saying that they found dozens and dozens and dozens of documents sequestered away in a special room of documents that were supposed to be destroyed, all relating to the Russiagate stuff with the fake dossier investigating Trump back after the 2016 election, all that stuff. Wow. So, turns out maybe the former FBI director was trying to cover his tracks after this blatant act of, I don't know, could we say act of insurrection? Remember all the January 6th stuff, we might as well just throw those terms right back at him, right? It seems to fit. Anyway, but is this maybe another escalation in the back and forth internal deep state war that's brewing, right? Or someone recently was just asking Trump about if he was gonna pardon Maxwell. He said, I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I guess I could, technically, I could. I haven't decided to or anything, but I could. Oh boy, I don't know. Releasing something like this, I'm just wondering, are we going to get the announcement now that she's been pardoned? And but don't pay any attention. We're also going to focus. We're going to focus on Obama, not on Trump, right? I don't know. I don't think the Democrats will let him get away with that, to be honest, because they're fighting back too. But in connection with that, there was saying an announcement that Pelosi made $500,000 in investments on Nvidia investments, and so Trump is talking about wanting to have her investigated for insider trading. Across the road there, kind of running down that same route initially, there's all this construction going on. Some work on like the water system, something like that. They're doing a lot of digging in the ground. But then again, it's Moscow. There's construction literally everywhere. You can't throw a stick without hitting some 25-story new apartment building construction project, because the city just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's here only 5 or 6 years ago. And yeah, just in that amount of time, it's already continued to grow a lot more. Anyway, looking at going after Pelosi for insider trading, which, yeah, absolutely, I'm not going to disagree with. But at the same time, I also kind of want to say, it's like, man, I remember when they were going after Trump back during the election with all some of these legal charges that were kind of, technically maybe they could go after him, but it sure seemed like selective prosecution, right? Kind of declaring a bit of war politically using investigations and all. And now you're going to open up this can of worms about that, and you think the Republicans are doing much better? We really want to look at, I don't know, how much of Lindsey Graham's campaign financing comes from the military-industrial complex. I wonder how many donations he got from racing on. Don't know. I'm just speculating here. Have no idea. Just completely speculating about those campaign contributions and things like that. At the same time, I saw a story recently that, that luxury jet that, Saudi Arabia gave Trump, right? That he accepted this gift for, but it's, it's not an American-made jet. Now it's going to cost him over $900 million, better part of $1 billion, to basically rebuild the thing, remove any possibility of listening devices, spying equipment, get it up to spec, because he wants to use it as the new luxury Air Force One. I mean, yeah, he justifies it as, well, it was a $400 million free gift. I'd be crazy not to take it. It's like, you're going to put $1 billion into remaking that thing? Sure, sounds like a vanity project or something. I'm not sure if we want to go down the road of pointing fingers at one side's corrupt or not. Well, actually, maybe we do want to go down that road so we can all let the public get an inside look at what the nasty world of the governing elites are like. So, actually, I agree. I would just think that Trump should probably should be careful what he wishes for if he goes down that road. I'm back. Just had to cross this highway that's like outer edge of Moscow, but it's a big loop around the whole outer edge of Moscow, and it's like 5-6 lanes each direction, and never a time of day that it is not back to back to back to back cars, constant traffic. So anytime I have to take the bridge over, it's deafening, so I have to kind of stop the video and pick back up. It's interesting though, man. Market for personal automobiles has just taken off so much in the last 3 decades, I guess. Now everyone seems to be getting a car. Even with public transport, everyone still wants a car. It's interesting, 5 or 6 years ago I used to see so many more American, Japanese, German cars. I still see a fair amount, right? It seems like Korean cars have really gotten a stronger foothold here since all the sanctions stuff they seem to take. I see a lot more like Audis here than I did last time I was here, but the Chinese cars though, tons of them now. I didn't really remember noticing that many of them last time, and now I see quite a few of them. Dealerships also for Chinese cars. Got some really nice ones too. I know I've kind of grew up with the typical stereotype. I was like, thank goodness there's no Chinese cars in America, they kill us all or something, but I don't know. I met an American guy here who got a Chinese car, and he's saying it's been a really nice car. He says he's very, very happy with it. Yeah, it seems like a decent number of people here now that's filling in that niche in the market seem to be fine with them. They seem to be pretty good. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll have to buy a Chinese car and I can compare. I did like Chevy back in the States, so I might be having to try to compare it to that at some point. See, Malibu was the last thing I was driving back in the States. I like that car. A lot of people don't care for them, but I liked it. So anyway, reading the news this morning, and we're looking at, 50% tariffs on Brazil. What we got? 25% on India. Yeah, Trump, I was listening to a news conference he was taking part in, and interview at least, and he was being asked about it, and the first thing he mentioned was, well, got BRICS, we gotta handle them, and can you believe it, but India's even a part of this group, and they're trying to take down the dollar and stuff like that. Yeah, back to the good old Biden 2.0, right? None of that, the U.S., America first. It's back to the neocon geopolitics stuff. Let's go after those countries, because got to keep the dollar on top. U.S. military intervening everywhere possible. All of that stuff. Didn't take him long to do a nice little 180. Not long at all. Anyway, so I think in that same interview he even mentioned something about how, what was it, India doesn't even matter that much, right? We don't do that much trade with them. They don't even matter. It's like, dude, diplomacy 101 is not your forte these days. I swear your first term you did a better job. I swear. It's like, even if you're not buying and selling, well, even if you're not buying that much from India, according to you, I thought they were absolutely central to this containing China emphasis that you guys just announced, right? Getting an alliance with China, with India to help contain China, because they're now the biggest country on earth, and they have a large border with China and some past tensions there, right? Get a hold of the Philippines, use them as a weapon against China, but also, kind of making this alliance, maybe even sort of a Pacific version of BRICS, get India, Australia, these countries on board. I thought that was central. I thought that was super important. And I was just like, yeah, let's slap them with those tariffs. And they don't even matter that much. And then as per what I was mentioning yesterday, they are the biggest producer of our iPhones and stuff now. And we know that Trump doesn't like when anything in the economy starts to be affected. I don't know. We'll see what he does. I was listening to an interview last night. It was the retired Indian foreign minister. And I mean, obviously he's not working there now. It was a good few years back. But if he's representative of any government thinking, having connections there, he was not happy. He was already discussing how they were going to have to find ways to not back down because it was a matter of sovereignty, right? They have to uphold their position of strength. They can't just unilaterally give in. They can't pull a European Union and just collapse and act like a vassal to the U.S. They're a country with its own identity and dignity, which, yeah, he's right. They shouldn't be backing down. Meanwhile, I saw it in a news feed from some Pakistani news, I think it was. They were pointing out that the State Department unveiled some new was announcing new sanctions against different entities involved in trading oil if it has any links with Iran. They're saying this is already going to start driving up oil prices right away. Man. All of those promises about how tariffs were going to be used and sanction policy need to be dialed back. Tariffs need to be used responsibly to help boost the American economy, and this is all we're getting out of this. Meanwhile, in Britain, I saw a news story that was saying now in the App Store, Britain, 4 of the 5 most used apps are all VPNs. Yeah. Even heard there's like Proton VPN and out of I think it was Switzerland is where they're out of. They've grown their rate of downloads by 19 times because remember all of this was protect children from porn, except now you can't go onto music without submitting your passport. You can't use Spotify. Yeah, maybe it wasn't just that. I love this area out here. I'm literally a 15-minute walk from my apartment, and I'm already look like I'm out in the country. I'm right on the edge, so I cross that big highway and then kind of head off down some of these trails that go out to some parks and stuff. And yeah, it gets rural very quickly. Anyway, so I was reading an article on CNN talking about the situation in Bakrovsk, key strategic town, and it was replete with all the typical propaganda stuff. But the headline main point was still dire situation, collapsing, not holding it back, right? They were doing an interview and saying, the drones are just absolutely dominating the sky, Russian drones, right? We had a special look inside the biggest drone factory in the world, or at least that's what it was titled in the story. I want to say it was RT was filming in this giant factory. I think it's in Kazan. They're pumping out hundreds into the thousands now every single day, just inundating Ukraine with these. And even CNN, with all of their inability to not throw in these sort of hard to substantiate jabs at Russia, these kind of just little propaganda talking points, still couldn't avoid the main takeaway of their story was that, it's things are looking bad. Even the logic on some of the stuff they put out, if you read it, always gets a little bit interesting, right? They're saying, Russia only ever makes tiny, tiny, tiny gains. Inconsequential. Except they're taking large amounts of land around this key place of Bakrovsk. It's only ever tiny, tiny gains, but they're taking large chunks of land around this area. It's like they're saying, in spite of their willingness to take far more casualties than Ukraine, Oh boy, some projection stuff going on right there. On that same topic, though, well, I guess I should say the takeaway from that is, even in the midst of as heavy as they lay on their propaganda, even they know it's about, the jig's about up, it seems. Can't hold on forever. It's a math problem. You can't have a country like Ukraine holding out against a military superpower. There's a limit on how many weapons the US can send. There's a limit on how much money the EU can pump into the never-ending black hole of Ukrainian, spending, but also, let's be honest, some corruption there, How many mansions does Zelensky own now, right? Anyway, though, on that point, Seymour Hersh on his blog put out a article where he had people from inside the U.S. Defense Department telling him about the 2 million some odd Russian casualties in this war, he's claiming. Problem is, the math gets utterly absurd if you think about it. Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst, right, high-level analyst, he on his website, he actually has a breakdown of how the numbers are mathematically impossible, given even the West's own estimates, right? He went and did some basic arithmetic there, and it's definitely worth reading, where he kind of went through the numbers, estimating how many people were in the active duty military at the start of the operation, the West's own estimates for how many people have been recruited, how many people have been brought into the military, right? And then the estimates of where we stand now, right? Because you figure out how many people were in there at the beginning, how many people got recruited, and then how many, even the West estimates, we have in the armed forces now. That difference, right, could at least give us an indicator. We have a difference of 1 million people, but that math didn't take into account that you have all these people whose contracts are up, who are in the military, and that's the end of their time, and they left, right? That's a lot of people, right? Over the last few years, a lot of people were in there, and then their time comes up. They're like, okay, moving on to the next thing. So even with that, you're talking at most this gap of 1 million, of which realistically only a tiny fraction of those are going to actually be KIA, anything like that. I want to say Media Zona, which is the project that actually digs into this, was estimating over 100,000 KIA, and they actually were a project that used some actual methodology behind it, though they have, I think, been basically taken over control of by, let's say it's people connected to the British government. It was always backed by like opposition groups and was in cooperation with the BBC, so it was never like pro-Russia in any way. So even them, even this group, right, the best they could come up with was 100, maybe it was 120,000, but still, whereas our 2 million casualties. But I'll even push back on that and just point out some even more common sense, simple math of what there's 143 million last I googled people in Russia. So let's say there's, for simplicity, 7 million some odd men in Russia, right? Men are always outnumbered by women. Men get themselves killed more often. They die earlier, all that kind of stuff, right? So for simplicity, a little over 70 million men in Russia. Okay, let's say 25 million of those are too old to be in the military. Retirees, whatever. Say another 20 some odd million are children under 18, Let's say, so if you're 70 million people, you've got a 30 million person, probably less. So you have all these people who are, out of shape, unfit for service, medical stuff. So, okay, let's say 25 million some odd people who are even eligible to be recruited. So you say you have 2 million casualties. So 1 out of every 12 people has been a casualty. 1 out of every 12 able-bodied males has been a casualty. And then on top of that, to maintain those casualties, you got to be taking way more than that number of people, pushing them into the military to send them out there. So 1 out of every 5 able-bodied men at any given point would have to be out over there fighting right now, all over the country. Which, I mean, there are a lot of people. But at the same time, I'm here in Moscow. There's young, able-bodied people everywhere. I mean, everywhere. There's no shortage. Like I said, I was here 5 or 6 years ago before all this stuff. If you're looking at the demographics, it's not been that huge a shift. Maybe something more like the, 1.5 million some odd people out there in uniform. That's an increase from what it was before the operation. But still, 1 million people. 1.5 million, 2 million maybe max. And we're not talking casualties. This is talking people tied up with the military operation out of the some 25 million young able-bodied males. Okay, I could believe that. But to be pushing these 1 out of every 5 that you kind of have to arrive at with some basic common sense, when I can walk around the streets here and just anywhere I go, it's just normal. It's not like, I remember some stupid propaganda video pushing this claim that if you went to nightclubs in Moscow, like it was specific, Moscow, right? Where I'm at, the women outnumber the men so much that even an ugly guy, if he visits, could land some, model or something like that, right? And it's just so patently ridiculous. There's guys everywhere. There's young guys who are, the college dropout type, just hanging out without anything better to do. Beautiful church back here, all the way out just middle of the field. This beautiful church. But yeah, it utterly boggles the mind, this kind of math that would imply that they'd have to be like mobilizing World War I level numbers of people. It's like, here in Moscow, it's kind of like back in the time of the Iraq War where, stuff was going on, but to a certain extent, life back home, it's like it just continues. It's not like there's this awareness of you're in the middle of this huge conflict the same way. Now, don't get me wrong. It's existential. It's a big deal. But at the same time, as far as like it affecting the level of life or feeling like there's not enough people or whatever, you don't feel anything like what it would require to come up with these numbers. Oh boy. Since I'm always filming with apartment buildings in the background, I'm finally in a place where there's actually a little bit of neighborhood suburb type stuff. Alright, I gotta start heading back. I have somewhere to be, so I'll start filming on the return trip now. Anyway, speaking of, CNN article I mentioned previously about, I think the way they worded it was the Russia's summer offensives creating a extreme escalatory crisis for Ukraine, right? And then the thing was basically saying, yep, they're screwed, right? But it is interesting with the talk about cyber warfare, stuff like that. The British Defense Minister making a statement about that a while back, not too long ago, saying they need to up the support for cyber attacks and all this. And then the thing on Aeroflot. Yeah, it does seem, looking at the local news here, like there's been just a big increase in all this like cyber trouble, cyber stuff in the last couple of weeks here. Even as things are collapsing in Ukraine, all of a sudden you're having a lot of this emphasis on these sort of cyber, I would say almost pinprick stuff. They're not all the Dixies around here were closed. They're like this little corner grocery store type thing, but they're very cheap. They're not like nice or anything. They're kind of one of those, if anything, I kind of avoid. They're sort of like the Dollar Tree, Dollar General for if you're from the American South or something like that. They're kind of like that emergency place you run into, but you're not relying on anything. But they're like some sort of. They were claiming technical issues, so I don't know. It might not have been a cyber thing at all, but all of their credit card readers or something like that were down, so they just closed because everyone uses cards here. Very few people use cash now, especially in somewhere like Moscow. So they were down for a day or two. And then Rostix, that's it's KFC. It's exactly KFC. It's just the company that took over for KFC when the sanctions hit. Same menu even, tastes the same. It's pretty good, actually. If anything, I like it better than I did in the U.S., but still. Like, for example, their their app was down where you could order online. So you actually had to go in and order in person from a human being. I know, right? Shock. People were not happy about that. It's like first world problems, right? You got to actually go in and order from a person at a counter, right? And then Vkusville also was having something like that, where it was the app was down. Vkusville is it's like a grocery store chain that's much nicer. Like it's a little bit more like your Whole Foods type stuff, where it's, it's more natural, all this kind of stuff. So it's a bit more expensive, but you can get some nice food there. I'm too cheap to go there very often unless I need something specific I can't find somewhere else, but anyway, but like their app was also down. I'm just noticing there's been a lot of these random things in the last few days, right around the same time as like the big Aerofloats attack, and also I am kind of curious if that's been this new emphasis. I'm just noticing a trend. I don't have any inside information on that. I don't know, but noticing the trend. Anyway, meanwhile, so we had, let me see, right? Stammer's been saying about Gaza that if Israel doesn't agree to some sort of ceasefire, does something about it, he's going to recognize Palestine. And then we had Macron say he was going to do it in, I want to say September. And then who else was it? Oh yeah, Carney, Prime Minister in Canada, is now saying that they're wanting to recognize Palestine. So it's interesting. I don't know if maybe there's some like residual collective West bitterness going on about how Trump has handled the EU and that trade deal and all this tariff stuff, so they're kind of collectively giving the middle finger to Trump. Well, that plus I'm sure the public and these countries in the West are probably being a bit shocked by the footage that's now kind of hard to deny about how Israel's been acting, right? I don't know, I don't think these politicians are probably acting out of particularly sincere altruism there, trying to help. I mean, like with Stammer, someone was pointing out recently on something I was listening to, saying, well, it's like, why not just recognize them now? Why should it matter whether or not Israel has negotiations with them? If you think they should be recognized as a state, just do it. No, the fact is, it's like the public in Britain's angry. Stammer's, approval ratings are tanking, so he has to give something, even though he doesn't necessarily sincerely want to. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it was somebody over at the Duran, I think, is saying that. I think it's probably spot on. So anyway, though, yeah, I doubt any of these people are particularly strongly wanting to, but I am kind of curious, since everything in the EU, Canada, Collective West always runs on virtue signaling and image, whether or not they're not going to kind of create this sort of virtue signaling avalanche to where you can't not go along with it, because now you have to support it, because they all kind of collectively pressured each other into doing it. So now all of a sudden all the countries in Europe are going to have to start recognizing Palestine. You know it's deep when Germany does it, after everything, all the support that they've given to Israel over the years for obvious past wrongs. I'm not saying that some countries didn't deserve to give some stuff to the Jewish population, but you'll know the Israelis have gotten out of control if we ever see Germany start talking that way. That's when it's reached critical mass. Anyway, though, I was reading a report recently. It pointed out that even in the midst of all these claims that, right, it's got nothing to do with Israel, right? The spokeswoman for the State Department was giving a interview or during a press conference the other night, and she was saying, it's like, this has nothing to do with Israel. Yeah, they're fine. The president might have said there was some starvation in Gaza, and yeah, he's right, but it's because of Hamas stealing the aid, right? These people put babies in microwaves. Yeah, I remember that quote. It was like, what? And all of this, right? Never mind the footage. Never mind Western journalists caught in the crossfire down there saying, nope, no, not that, right? No, never mind any of that. Nothing to see here. Israel is completely innocent, right? Completely innocent. Never mind decades of human rights violations that have been well documented. Nope, they're innocent. They would never do that. And then just yesterday or today came out the article pointing out, or a report that I was looking at, that showed that 2 major Israeli human rights groups were now coming out and calling it a genocide, basically condemning their own country. They're based out of Israel, saying that they have now assessed that Israeli policy was responsible for all of this. It's pushing this sort of ethnic cleansing, something along those lines, as I recall from the wording. And so even major Israeli groups are now coming out there and doing it. And then you see prominent, Jewish people, even in the US, and all of these protests and all coming out and be like, no, we got family in Israel, whatever. Yeah, this isn't right. You have people in Israel not happy with this. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Israel as a nation, or at least their government, holds a lot of blame, because there's some crazed thinking on a lot of this. But you do see that even within Israel, people are starting to go, whoa, wait a minute. What's our government been saying? What have they been doing? Yeah, but State Department's just going to keep going and saying, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see. Nothing to see. Oh, well. I'll finish off with a humorous thing I saw. Well, sadly humorous. Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman for the foreign ministry in Russia, on her Telegram, she reposted or shared this quote that was put out by the head of the Electoral Commission in Moldova. All right, in which he was mentioning the subject of EU interference in the recent Moldovan elections, right? The EU was all involved in that, right? If you remember the news from that, right? They were outright campaigning for the pro-EU candidate, all that stuff, right? And he was saying that it doesn't count as interference because Moldova is already so close to the EU has a right to interfere. They have a right to interfere if they want. They have a right to come and get involved in our elections, and you can't call it because they have a right. I wonder how you are a country in the EU and don't feel like you're a vassal, as there's the shift towards more and more of this kind of thinking and speaking, right? Or if you're in Britain and you vote to leave, and then your country basically like, yeah, we can't, we're not, well, you voted, we said we would, don't care, we're gonna nullify it, and basically kind of act like we still are. Same policies, right? Ah, man, they have a right to interfere. Why am I not surprised? Anyway, that'll do it for today. I'm on a tight schedule, so I gotta get back, but I have enjoyed getting out here. Some beautiful, more country-esque scenery out here. It is amazing. You'll probably see this in some future videos. I like this walk out this direction. It's not too far, and I can feel like I'm full-blown outside the city for a little bit here. So anyway, that's all for today, folks.